Hi, and here in this episode 4 of my China adventures, I want to share a little bit of the story of Tim. Now, I met Tim first in about 2006, riding on a subway next to him. He was trying to learn English and began what has been a 18-year relationship. I'm going to tell you a little bit about his story. He grew up in a very, very poor section, and he became an artist, very good at sculptures and things like that. And so he bounced around from job to job. He's a rough and tumble guy. He was a fighter. He was, very passionate and things. And he ended up in Beijing. And in Beijing, him and his wife began to work at a place that made figurines. And what he did in his artwork and in his modeling and in his sculpture work is he worked on making things for Sight and Sound gift shop. So this was a ministry actually set up in China that would make these products and they would share their witness. So he began to work, and his wife worked there, and his wife worked in a different department. She wasn't an artist, but she kept hearing about Jesus Christ. And she would come home and she would tell him, and he goes, listen, he goes, that's not for me. I'm Buddhist. My parents are Buddhist. My grandparents are Buddhist. Our whole family is Buddhist. So believe what you want, but don't expect me to change. So anyway, eventually his wife became a Christian. And she would come home and she would tell what she learned from these Americans and what she learned in their studies, what they learned in their discipleship. And he said, yeah, that's fine for you. That's fine for you. But I'm Buddhist and I'm not going to change. That's my family. We are all. And he was a very, very large family, strong family back in his hometown. And then one day, the idea came to him because he said, God, my wife says that you are the God that raises the dead. Now, you know that the doctors have said my wife can never have a child. If you're the God that raises the dead, you could give me a son, and I would know that you're really God, and I would serve you the rest of my life. Well, a few months later, his wife came home and said, I got a surprise for you. I'm pregnant. And shortly after that, their first son was born, and true to his word, that impacted his heart and caused faith to rise up, where he really knew that there was a real God, and then he answered prayers and he did miracles. So Tim today is still a believer and still follows the Lord, and is very, very interesting. In fact, many, many people that I've met in China have a similar story. They weren't a believer. They heard about God and Jesus Christ, and they weren't convinced. But they came to a crisis moment in their life where they said, if you are really God, you could do something. God showed up, and faith rose up, and they became a believer. So how many times do we have not because we ask not? How many times do we just like, oh, well, I'm just going to rely on the doctors. Oh, I'm just going to rely on this and that. Rather than saying, God, if you're God, you could do this and I would know. I believe that God wants us to know that he's real and that he is interested in our lives and that he wants to show himself strong. So that's the story of Tim's conversion into faith.